Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Innovative Thinking in Legacy Environment session, where we meet with Gastón Gaitán, who is the founder of theleisureway, where we meet with Christopher Choa, who is the managing director of the OUTCOMIST, David Johnsson, who is partner in Sierra Architects, and Joshua Nuttall, who is managing director of the XYZ Playground platform, and myself, CEO of Heitland Innovation. My name is Heitland. So welcome to the discussion, and let's hand over straight away to Gastón.
Okay, well, thank you, Jens, for the introduction. And basically, we put this roundtable with a mission of trying to see what has the real estate market is looking for in terms of new trends, new appetites, since we detected a long time ago that the market was moving slowly and new tools were needed in order to bring innovation, to bring new thinking, new needs to be fulfilled. So the mission of today is to basically try to give you 2 or 3 basic points that from different perspectives, from leisure, from sustainability, from architecture, from city or urban design, from young professionals and entrepreneurships DNA, what should a legacy environment or a real estate project should have in order to cope with these new demands, since we all understand that it's a dramatic change we went through in the last 2 years, and also there's a big opportunity to really enhance this real estate world and bring something that is not there created. So hopefully, with these 5 minds put together, we can start to digest some of the new condiments that this new recipe should have. So let's cook, guys.
Thank you, Gastón. So we have a little running order. We start off with Christopher Choa, then we go to Joshua Nuttall, then we go to David Johnsson, then we go to Gastón again, and I will finish up in the end. Christopher.
Great. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect.
Excellent. All right. Well, the theme today, and it's sort of set out in the brief, is how do we create emotional connections in our developments? And we're concerned and we're very mindful of what happens when we are not integrated with the community. So if we are planners, if we're leaders, of course we think about planning and leading our communities. And good cities are thoughtfully planned. But the best cities are the ones that expose us to randomness. The best communities are the ones that can also bring us into new experiences, because we're limited by our own imaginations. As a human species, we gain insight and we also gain connection when we can meet people who are just like us, but also a few people who are not quite like us. So as we think about how to create engagement and how to strengthen our communities, I want to imagine not just how do we make it perfect for ourselves and people just like us, but how can we expand it so it becomes a little bit more interesting for other people in a way that also benefits us. So I just want to put that out there for starters.
Thank you very much, Christopher. Let's move on to Joshua.
Thank you for the invitation to join the panel today. And I'm going to offer a younger thinker or a younger professional's perspective on the topic that we're chatting about today. So as with Christopher, I'm going to try and leave you with 3 things. So those 3 things are ownership, access, and information. And starting with ownership, and as I mentioned, I'm a younger thinker, and we live and have been brought up in a highly digital and technologically centric world. However, I challenge us all to rethink and think about how and where people sit inside of that world. How then do we think about ownership? So obviously being brought up in a digital-centric world, we've got different access to ownership. And that leads on to the next point around access. In terms of, from a younger thinker's perspective, we've got a wealth of information at our fingertips. We've also got the ability to access things at a far more convenient rate and a higher convenience than previous generations. And that leads into my third point around information is how can we use information from different generations, what we call in my thinking space is cross-generational learning inside of that space. How can we use all of those different access points to information, to knowledge, to create better platforms to make decisions that will guide better things into the future and allow us to create more, and Chris, I love the word that you used around inclusivity, inclusive spaces that are cross-generational, but also way more diverse than the world that we live in today. And so to round off, maybe I'll throw a bit of a bone out there and I'll say, how can we, as a cross-generational thinker and a young thinker, challenge the way that ownership has been thought of in the past? And if we look at cities, and particularly in the built environment, is those were developed by city planners and by architects and by developers across the state. How can we now develop places that are better suited to the ownership of future generations and to the younger generations inside of the space in which we live? So thanks again for the opportunity. And that's just, like Chris said, a few thoughts to kick off some other conversations in the future.
Thank you very much, Joshua. David, it's your stage now.
Well, good morning from San Francisco, California, and thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. I can tell we're going to have very different points of view, and that's by design, I think, isn't it? I think that COVID has identified the weaknesses in our structures and in our social structures, and climate change is going to make this seem like a speed bump. So hold on to your hat. This is going to move quickly. We are at the edge of the greatest opportunity, economic and social, that we have had for generations. We are in the transition from an extractive, unfair economy to an equitable, regenerative economy. And because we're in the transition, we don't really see it. We're right in the middle. So we can't see it yet. and our friends in the EU are working harder than us in the US on defining the taxonomy that we're going to be using so that the financial markets and the language of builders and planners and city developers are going to align. We're going to be pulled into solutions through economic levers. So what seems foreign now is going to become familiar. Using ESG for risk avoidance and reductive measures is going to be changed to a metric of positive design in a regenerative economy that's patterned after nature. I'm just an architect and a planner, but I see this happening right now, and I challenge us to talk about it. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Gastón, it's yours.
Well, at the end, it's difficult not to agree with Chris, David, and Joshua. There are so many points, but I'd like to put it in let's say, simple words. We're talking about innovative thinking and a legacy environment. And legacy means transferring, and we talk about this emotional transferring, why we are connected to that. And this is a case where, at the Leisure Way, and we try to think how we can put the pillars of thinking in order to create that legacy environment that will connect to the people. And how do we start? Is basically on the first step, understanding the people, which in many of these real estate projects sometimes is something that they put it aside. They do many surveys, but they don't really connect. Somehow in the last 20 years, we forgot about words in this economy about sensibility. How we can really be intuitive and learn about people that are not just telling us straightforward. We need to be connected to them. So this emotional connection actually starts, as Joshua said, from the owners, trying to connect with the place. Second part of the second pillar that we really have in our brain in order to innovate and to bring these places where people wanted to live or they wanted to visit, que es visión, no sé quoi, is let us, the place speak to us. Let us learn, let's spend the time to really detect which are going to be the key ingredients to extract to create that emotional connection. So, it's for us, we go to the basics. Let's hear the people, let's feel the place, and last but not least is about the content. We are in a content-driven generation where content is not something that you can bring up and learn in another place and bring it and paste it. Copy-paste is not a possibility. So basically the content is the realization of many of the ideas, of the needs that people have. So it's important to really have this framework of people, place, and content thought from the beginning of a project, understanding how people think, what are their desires, what is already the DNA there where we can extract the condiment, and how we're going to create that content that really is meaningful to the people, not to us, to the people. So basically, we believe that making things difficult doesn't work. Let's make the difficult part easy and direct and forward. People, place, and content. Johnsson.
Thank you very much, Gastón. Now I'm handing over to myself. First of all, I would like every listener to think differently, because working in the real estate and connected to the real estate world my whole life, basically, it's what I've learned. You will never wear a T-shirt to a panel discussion. And that's why I'm doing it. I would like to challenge all of you from a perception perspective. So another tweak I give you, before I started my own business 2 years ago, I was the global head of innovation for IKEA centers. So what do I want to say with that? Nothing. It's not important at all. But what is important for the real estate industry is that we need to change. We need to look into topics that help us to change going forward. And I think one of the biggest topics we can do is looking into how do we change the business model, because the business model, if we start to look into how do we monetize the business of real estate in the future, will unlock a huge potential of what we are able to do with real estate, which is one of the most amazing industries to be in. So how do we gonna do that? One part is we need to think, how do we change leadership? How do we change our ways of thinking? How do we lead towards the future? And I think there's a lot of topics you already mentioned. We need to think about how do we do this in a way that we engage with all the others from day one, and how do we bring people together and working together and creating win-win situations for each other. And then that leads into a culture shift. So we need to change the culture of our organizations internally to be able to change things externally. So it's really working with people in front and center, changing our culture from the inside of our organizations, and then using the business model shift as an opportunity to change the future of the real estate industry. That's just as a small starting point for an open discussion. So we have now 10 minutes left. Who wants to start reacting to the others? Chris.
Hey Jens, I want to pick up on some of your points. And you are speaking about real estate really from the point of view of entrepreneurship. And I think you're right, because you can think about entrepreneurship as a kind of company setting. And cities are not that different, actually. It's, of course, the city is not a company, but it's an organization of people. But if we're really trying to consider how we improve engagement with a community, for example, to make better places, I think we can think about it in probably at least four different cases. Are we inside the community already, or are we seeking to come into the community? Is a community rising, or is it actually declining? And each of these cases, in a way, presents different challenges and different opportunities. But your question, how do we change the business model of an organization or of a city? And it occurs to me that one of the things that our generation, and I think we're all, with the exception of Josh, maybe we're all part of this generation, we've been trained to think about place first. If somehow we can make the place good enough or attractive enough, people will come. And it creates the engagement afterwards. But I think my own thoughts about this is starting to evolve. And I'm beginning to think the new business model is you start with the people first. If you have a declining city, a declining organization, you don't make nicer desks and put up prettier plants and hope the right people come in. You can have the crappiest office, but you get the right kind of person to come in the first place. And that person attracts other people like her, like him, to join. And then you start to have something that grows. And cities are no different. I think, to me, to change the business model by focusing on getting the kinds of people that you want to have in your community, and they in turn attract other people, because that's the secret of cities. People attract people.
Thanks, Chris. Who would like to?
I think if we learn from biology, Chris and Gastón, we would see that for a place to be vital and healthy, it needs to connect to more of itself. When a foreign intervention comes into an ecosystem, most often it dies or it harms that system until the system recovers. And what you're saying, and I think it's echoed in Gastón's words as well, is that we need to look at the people and the place first. How obvious is that? In regenerative design, one of the goals of regenerative design is to increase the capacity of the systems of that place. So rather than bringing in a foreign intervention, maybe it's a big blue metal box with a yellow sign. Instead of bringing in a big intervention, how do we become local to that place and make that place better and connect that place to more of itself to bring vitality and health?
I agree. That's well said. I like what you said. You're trying to increase the capacities of the system itself.
Yeah. Rather than inventing new systems, rather than bringing foreign and new systems solutions to a place, what if we increase the capacity of the social systems, the biological systems, the water systems, the energy systems, the social systems of that place, and start there?
Let's go to Gastón and then to Joshua after that.
Well, when you talk about biology, I like this science, all of the science, but it's the basic need in our science ourselves as humans to have a good time. This is basically we all need. We want to be in the good place. So how can we create a good place? That's the key. And for sure, it's not adding things on top. It's thinking together how we're going to be understanding those people to be able to design and build things that are meaningful and really respond to their needs. So, there's this connection, that in the past of the real estate market, of trying to build something without understanding the people. And you see a ton of projects around the world, those towns that they don't have any type of social environment, which is how come this could happen? It's nonsense. It's basically, we are talking basic math. You cannot do a project for you. You are doing it for others. And you have to understand those people in order to get something that will make their lives better. So that's the game for us. And I think, we can always go back to this basic natural need of, we all want to be better, not worse.
Joshua.
So, Gastón, I love what you said about the key ingredients. And I think that really sort of synthesizes a lot of what's been discussed today around how do we think differently and what are those ingredients that will allow us to think differently. And I think we've touched on one of them, which is people. I think there are a couple of others, and maybe just this one other one to consider is place. And I think that we've got our own habits and we've got certain tendencies to graduate towards specific place. If you think about the way that humans have evolved and things like that. And I think that if you start to think about people and place, you can start to understand mindsets differently. And that goes back to another point that's been raised in the discussion today around how do we identify what people actually want? What are their needs, dreams, and desires? And if you can start breaking down those big questions and start making them into more granular, more manageable tasks. And David, it goes back to a point that you raised about regenerative design. And inside of that space, if you think about people and place, how do you create places that are more regenerative by design and start to teach people to be more regenerative in their thinking and their mindsets, in the way that they're approaching the challenges and things that they face. And quickly, just to round up, there's a massive drive around sustainability, as I'm sure many people listening and those on the panel will know. But I think that one of the biggest things is the way that people are starting to think about designing for sustainability, because they are now being forced to consider right the way through from the very form of creation. If you take a specific shoe, for example, now I'll use Salomon's shoe as a great example here, is where they have now conceptualized a plastic shoe that can then be reconstructed into a ski boot. And if you think about the lessons inside of that, again, people and place, if we're bringing that into the built environment, how do we start thinking about constructs and also materials that can be regenerative by nature when we start building, rather than thinking about we are building for a specific purpose and then the road ends there.
I have a question for ourselves here. Joshua, you talked about in a way trying to deliver a place to accommodate what people want. But people are very funny. What they say they want is often quite different from what they actually want. How do you square those things? If you say you want something, but I know from your behaviors that you actually want something else, what side of you do I optimize? I guess it's an open question, but I'll go to Joshua first.
Well, Joshua, just to give you, I think this is a couple of things. Two words: sensibility and intuition. These two words are not used in the real estate market. I think it is some basic science in the humans to understand others without saying the straightforward things. Sometimes people wanted to say things, but you intuitively understand something else. Somehow, the real estate market forgot about this. And this is the lack of sensibility that we are having. So it's very difficult, your question, but I think that's the master of trying to see what people are not saying. It's very hard, but this is the part of the game where our souls have to be plain. Joshua, sorry to interrupt.
Gastón, no, not at all. And I think that you've hit on a few great points, and I'll try and build on them quickly. So, Chris, to answer your question, and it links very closely to something that Gastón just mentioned, is there's a process of listening where it says when you listen, you need to be asked the question of what is not being said. And I think to understand of what we want and what we need, you need to then ask the question, as those facilitating or potentially looking at creating those spaces, what is not being said by those specific people? They've got their wants and they've got their needs, but what is potentially the magic in between those, and then what is not being said inside of that? So I would advocate that to understand and to potentially deliver better places is that we look at listening better and really look at taking a step back and asking a cross-generational view rather than just a one-directional perspective.
I agree with that. And I would say that part of listening, of course, is actually not just listening to the people who are thinking just like you, but also being able to listen to people who are not quite like you. So I would say, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If I'm a city planner, all I want to do is think and talk through the lens of the city. But I would say that if we have people and places, which are the two big ideas that have come out so far on this talk, I would add one more quality, and that's connection. Because unless you have a way of moving people around, eliminating the frictions that they might otherwise have, there's no connection between people in different places. So I would say connection and mobility in a city scale is key, because that's the only way you can really get people to move around and listen to each other, which is another way of saying, have a way, an opportunity to go to work and to be with other kinds of people. And I'm struck by a new idea, I guess a new word, which I never had growing up, but it's something from evolutionary biology, and it's the word sociality, and which is it's kind of like the survival response to evolutionary pressure. And it's the ability to form cooperative societies. But sociality, which is in urban terms, the number of people that you can meet over the course of a single day, is a key metric. If you are living in a perfect little village with 3 people that you get along with, that's fine. But it's unlikely that you're going to evolve, or for that matter, it's unlikely that you're going to survive an evolutionary pressure. But the best cities where people can move around easily and be exposed to other people in other places become very resilient. And the way we're going to start to measure it more and more is sociality, I think.
Like that perspective, because it's also what if you take, we're building places, so we are constructing something which is staying for a long time. What we're not good at, or haven't been good at, is prototyping our way through it, and that's where the innovator comes in. It's like, come with a solution and that will be built and that is fixed, rather than, hey, let's try something tiny bit and then learn from it and take it to the next level, adjust it, tweak it, get more input in it, and then take it to the next level. I think that's something from a way of thinking, from a way of mindset, we can as well use in the industry to move it into a different space than we're in right now.
So we need a feedback process.
Exactly.
That's what I like about this. What I like about this conversation is where the title is innovation, and oftentimes people think that there's a technological solution or something that can be applied and be fixed. Here we are talking about very soft factors and ancient wisdom about the way people interact and think and move, and wouldn't it be great if the innovation of the future returned to ancient principles rather than applying pat solutions wherever we go?
Well, we can start thinking about, instead of smart cities all the time, we should think about the unsmart city, meaning let's go back to a very basic issue, which is what are we trying to accomplish? And at the end of the day, we come together as a society.
And on that point, David, and you may very well be familiar with the term traditional ecological knowledge and low-tech thinking. And I was fortunate last year to stumble across Julia Watson's work. And it's quite remarkable just to see how much we can learn from the way nature constructs her environment, and that word that you referenced earlier around ecosystem thinking. And it's very powerful.
So our time is up. I would like it's super fast, I know, but there's an opportunity. So I was just building up while we are speaking a super short summary, and it's never going to be precise. So what I wrote down is a sentence and a perspective of: think differently, start with people, create places, cities that enable growth regeneratively through connections. So it's not a proper sentence, but it's...
That's it. Finish. Let's close it.
Yeah, exactly. So for all the listeners, so we're basically a group of people who met first time today in this call, in this constellation. And what we said is, because we got to know each other 10 minutes before this call, and then we said, hey, we should do something bigger out of that than just having a conversation in the public. So we will set up something excitingly coming out in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So please head over to LinkedIn and connect to us on LinkedIn, and you will see what's coming out. that's it for today. And thank you very much for listening and joining our conversation. Thank you to everyone for being part of it.
Thank you. Thanks, Jens. Thanks, Gastón. Bye, David. Bye, Joshua.
Thank you.
Good morning.